Designing a game that's a genuinely fun and thrilling experience from start to finish is much tougher than it looks, because when a game clocks in at 10, 20, or even 30 plus hours, there is a lot of room for players to start losing interest. And while developers will typically kick off their games with an exciting set piece to catch the player's attention, it is fair to say that a lot of games fall down hard when it comes to the climax. So with that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 awesome video games that fail in the third act. Number 10, Uncharted 2 Among Thieves. For its majority, Uncharted 2 Among Thieves marked a significant step up in terms of both cinematic production values and gameplay quality compared to its more uneven predecessor. But you won't find many who harbour much love for the game's final third, at which point the gunplay, already by far the worst aspect of the entire series, becomes seriously demoralizing. The monotonous abundance of gunfights are less fun than a genuine task to force yourself through, while more dynamic cinematic set pieces end up taking a back seat. And once you reach the game's last area, the fabled land of Shambhala, you have to contend with the deeply obnoxious final boss battle against an antagonistic bullet sponge, as well as supernatural regular enemies that are much more frustrating than awe-inspiring. Number 9, Alien Isolation. Much as those who wish to wring every last second out of their games in the pursuit of value might scoff at the idea of any game being too long, Alien Isolation is a textbook example of a game that suffers from spectacle fatigue. Given that the bulk of the game is a claustrophobic cat-and-mouse chase between protagonist Amanda Ripley and the Xenomorph, it feels like a concept best suited to a shorter playtime of, say, around 6 hours, maybe 8 at a push. But a first playthrough of Alien Isolation can easily run double that, and during those final 3 or 4 hours, it is a game that becomes exhaustingly padded and overcrowded with set pieces. From fending off those annoying androids to contending with more xenomorphs amid a series of increasingly outlandish set pieces, it goes from feeling like Ridley Scott's original film to a sequel directed by Michael Bay. There's always something else the player needs to do in order to press forward, and the result is a game where less would have certainly been much more. Developers Creative Assembly clearly wanted to leave players exhausted by the game's end, but probably not to the point that continuing forward felt like a genuine grind. Number 8, Fahrenheit. Okay, name a more iconic duo than Quantic Dream and video games that completely crap the bed in the final stretch. And yet, they've never made more of a dog's dinner of it than in their first interactive drama game, 2005's Fahrenheit. Though flawed, Fahrenheit did have a frankly incredible foundation, telling a supernatural murder mystery across a sprawlingly cinematic, David Lynch-inspired canvas, while shifting the perspective between 3 main characters. The game opens with protagonist Lucas Kane becoming possessed and brutally murdering a man in a diner, and for the next 5 or so hours, Fahrenheit remains a consistently fascinating, if increasingly bonkers, ride. But that promise falls off almost entirely in the final couple of hours, when Lucas is swiftly transformed into a Neo-esque superhero who acrobatically battles his foes with an inexplicable aptitude. Yet its worst offense lies in forcing a painfully unearned romance between Lucas and Carla Valenti, the cop investigating him, which sees them shag and declare their love for each other in record time, enough so that the only response is to kind of gut laugh at the silliness of it all. As it turns out, Fahrenheit's final third was originally much longer, but due to time constraints it had to be cut short, resulting in this car crash of a final reel. Number 7, Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor. Middle-earth: Shadow of Mordor is a mostly excellent game built around its groundbreaking Nemesis system, whereby the Uruk hierarchy will react to its encounters with you across the game. So, Uruks who defeat you will be promoted through the ranks, while those who survive fighting you will remember the prior clash and even show scars of that battle. But Shadow of Mordor's finale regrettably saw the developers deliver what they seemingly thought they had to do, which is a duo of nothing burger boss fights that few players had much interest in. You defeat the first of Sauron's 2 remaining captains by stealth draining his health and then stabbing him to death in a cutscene QTE, and as for the other captain, the Black Hand, he cuts his own throat as part of a ritual, allowing Sauron to possess him directly. Yet, just as fans get their hopes up for an awesome final duel with Sauron's physical form, it turns out to be nothing more than a series of more QTEs, which wrap the fight up in all of a hot minute. Number 6, Shenmue 2. Shenmue 2 is in many aspects a mesmerizing RPG that majorly improves upon the already brilliant original, but damn if those final 2 or so hours aren't just a total slog. The final act of the game sees protagonist Ryo in pursuit of his father's killer, Lan Di, at which point the game transitions into a painfully protracted QTE fest with limited actual gameplay. Now, the Shenmue series' pacing is sedate at the best of times, but this truly tested the patience of even die-hard fans. Though some defend the section as serenely atmospheric, it is, with its overabundance of QTEs and relentless chit-chat, not to mention a total lack of combat, a stamina-draining chore to get through. This more sedate on-rails chapter just couldn't compare to the more bustling gameplay throughout the game prior, and the fact that it built up to an agonizing cliffhanger, one which wasn't really dealt with in the long-awaited third game either, no less, just made it all the more deflating. Number 5, Crisis. The original Crisis was, quite understandably, marketed on the appeal of using a nanosuit to navigate a large sandbox-style environment in order to either sneak past or eliminate enemy combatants. And the first 2/3 of the game are very much focused on putting paid to this idea. But in the final 2 hours or so of the game, there is a major shift into a more linear, less interesting style of gameplay. Because once you reach an alien structure, you're forced through an irritating zero-gravity section, and even when you get back into the wide world, progression becomes linear, while the previously creative combat is replaced with dull engagements against alien creatures. And that's before getting into the concluding boss fights, which are more tedious slugs that feel like they belong in other, less compelling games entirely. The wide-open jungle combat is so ludicrously entertaining that ripping players away from it, and for so long no less, was a major creative miscalculation. As such, you couldn't really blame players if they just turned the game off after reaching the alien core on repeat playthroughs. Number 4, Halo 2. Halo 2 is in many ways a major step up from Bungie's iconic original FPS, offering up an incredible ahead-of-its-time multiplayer suite and campaign which daringly saw players swap between controlling Master Chief and the Covenant Arbiter. Halo 2 also sets up a number of tantalizing threads early on, the majority of which are still tragically left up in the air by the game's end, given that it ends abruptly with a closing cutscene in which Master Chief promises to finish the fight next time. Considering that the game's final mission, The Great Journey, feels like less of a finale than an excruciating ramp-up to the actual one, fans were left majorly pissed off that Halo 2's campaign basically lacked the promised conclusion. It was later revealed that Bungie was railroaded into delivering the game for a set-in-stone November 2004 release date, forcing them to scrap an intended finale in which the Master Chief and the Arbiter teamed up on Earth to battle the Prophets. And that sure does sound like a much better ending that we just didn't get. Number 3, Okami. If you thought Alien Isolation was bad in outstaying its welcome by a couple of hours, it's got nothing on cult classic action-adventure game Okami, which will take most players at least 30 hours to beat. Now, there is a reason for that, as Okami is effectively 3 games worth of story smushed into one package, and while you might be tempted to laud Capcom for basically selling 3 games for one price, the third act sure is a patience tester. Just when it all feels like it's wrapping up, it continues to keep going. The final section, the Arc of Yamato, culminates in an exhausting boss rush of all the major previous bosses, and comes at the end of several "you're definitely at the end now" fake-outs, and as such concludes the game on a majorly bum note. Now, Okami is a wonderful title in so many respects, but also one that's tough to wholeheartedly recommend to new players because it's so grotesquely saggy and bloated. By the time it's over, you'll probably wonder what else you could have done with your time during those interminable final hours. Number 2, Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain. The great agony of Metal Gear Solid 5: The Phantom Pain is that it doesn't really have a proper third act at all, thus ensuring it's basically the most disappointing 9 out of 10 game ever made. Due to the title being released before Hideo Kojima was actually finished with it, The Phantom Pain ends rather abruptly, as after defeating Metal Gear Philanthropus, Eli, aka a young Liquid Snake, disappears out of Dodge with the machine, and that's basically all she wrote. No real conclusion bar a last-minute twist. Now, a third chapter containing an additional mission in which Snake battles Eli on a remote island was cut due to time constraints, ensuring that, despite the series' penchant for bombastically excessive finales, this one felt bizarrely curt. And that's without getting into the fact that players had to go through a measure of busy work to unlock the so-called real secret ending, which reveals that you weren't in fact playing as Big Boss at all, but instead an implausibly conceived doppelganger. The twist is dropped without much context, ensuring it massively divided the fanbase and left many angry that Konami didn't allow Kojima to deliver his full version of the final Metal Gear. Number 1. Dragon Age 2. Dragon Age 2 gets a lot of justified scorn for its confined setting and shameless asset reuse, but on its own merits, the core gameplay, writing, and characters absolutely do live up to the quality of the original. It's a shame then that the game's third act was a haphazard rush job compared to the more considered, delicately unspooled 2 that preceded it. There are few games where a looming deadline is more palpably felt within the game itself, as the final third not only races through the remaining story, but the quests more blatantly recycle dungeons and NPCs, while being egregiously littered with bugs for added irritation. Furthermore, the game's a big climactic choice, choosing to either side with the mages or the Templars, doesn't much affect the outcome, ensuring the possible variations throughout the journey all end up feeling quite pointless. And for all the flack BioWare still catches for Mass Effect 3, they arguably screwed the pooch much harder in Dragon Age 2 the year prior, albeit due to frankly ridiculous deadlines that were placed upon them. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. Were you as disappointed with these third acts as I was? And are there any other disappointing ones that I missed off here? Let me know, and while you're down there, if you could, please give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to What Culture Gaming for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't though, I've been Josh, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.